Hey, this is Chuck from Jockey Machine. Just wanted to give a quick intro. This video is the wiring of the CB550 winter project. Just wanted to let you know this is going to be a long video. And the way my mind works when I'm wiring something up like this, I don't necessarily take the best videos, and I'm not a good videographer. I'm not a good Photoshop and putting all these things together. So bear with me. I'll be jumping in and filling space with these little snippets and vignettes to put in between when I was actually doing the work to explain what's going on. But stay tuned. I'm gonna start with wiring up the bars, move into wiring up the M button, get into then the M.Unit with the switches, and just at the end of this, I'll be going into lessons learned and what I found to be probably the more gotchas in wiring up. This is the first time I've ever done an M-Unit, and I gotta tell you, it was easy. So if you've ever thought about, is it worth the $450 to go out and buy one of these units for an old bike? Yeah, it is. It's pretty cool. I synced up the application the other day to the bike, and the bits and pieces that it gives you, the little alarm systems, the proximity starting of your bike through your phone, pretty cool, especially when it's connected to a 1975 motorcycle. So stay tuned and we'll get into this more. All right, so in this first segment here, what you don't see is I started the whole thing with probably about 3 days of planning out my wiring. So what I did was I put together a bunch of wiring diagrams, just simple hand-drawn stuff. I also talked with the folks at Revival Cycle, who provided me a really nice simplistic wiring diagram with the Regulator and rectifier already on the wiring diagram, how other components of the bike were set up, including the oil sensor and neutral sensor switches. So I took that all in, as well as the M-Unit wiring diagram, put that all together, created my own wiring harness. So I probably did about 3 different types of wiring diagrams that I wanted to do and how I wanted to do them, and then picked the best one, or the most simplistic that I thought was going to work the best. So what you see here, I'm going to start with, is wiring up the bars. So I started with putting on my M switch housings onto the bars, as well as the perches for the brake and clutch, already mounted on the bars, mounted on the bike. I had pre-drilled the bars already for the center clamp, because the clamp has the mini LEDs in it and a wire that comes out the back of the clamp. So I had a hole drilled straight through the middle of the bars at the 1 1/8 mark in the Renthal fat bars, so that way the wire could go straight through it. I also put gussets in there so that none of the wiring would get frayed through vibration or anything like that. Also made sure that, you might not see in the video, I went ahead and deburred all of the holes that we put in there, as well as putting shrink tubing around these little, I think they're 28 gauge or 22 gauge wires from the M button. Put shrink wrap on those, especially where it was coming through the hole, to make sure 100% these things aren't getting eaten up. And then I think that's about it. So let's get into the video. Alright, so we're going to start with the bars. I think that's the easiest place to start, from the front, work our way back. Went ahead and made sure that my switch housing was securely in with the set screw down here. Pulled the buttons off using the set screw on the bottom. And I will now take the buttons and add the grounding wire to one side of each button, and then wire up the power side. Alright, so took the packaged grounding wire here, added it to one side of each one of the triple buttons. This will be on the left side of the bike. And that's what it looks like. So now I'm going to go ahead and find a really good spot to go ahead and throw a hole through here, and we can wire the buttons through the bar. Alright, so went ahead, started wiring up the bars. Sent the wiring through the bars from the Mo button, so it was a little difficult. At certain parts, you actually have to run, you get the little M button, which is like a little capsule. It looks almost like a pill with wires coming out the end of it. You actually have to double back your wiring and push it into the bar past that wiring. 7/8 with the size of the Mo button the way it is right now, the way Moto Gadget makes it, 7/8 is a little tight with that back from the with that wiring running past the button itself. So be careful with that. The twists that we had in the bars, the bends that actually went down, I thought, you know, hey, the bar is getting bigger as it gets to the center of these fat bars. So I thought I should be able to push this thing to that first bend, and it should actually just fall right into the center of the bars because it's getting bigger, right? But apparently the radius of that bend was not good enough in order to get the little M button through there. So what you don't see in this video is you see the end result. What you don't see is me pulling the M button out probably about 2 or 3 times, and then finally deciding at the end, you know what, I'm gonna drill these holes a little bit bigger and that are in the bars themselves in order to make it easier to pull the lines through. And then what I'm gonna do is on the far side, on the right side controls, I'm actually going to extend these wires out, and then that way it's just gonna make it so much easier. I don't have to push that M button as far in on the bars as I needed to. So that way it actually helped with the wiring. I gave myself a little bit more play, especially for the secondary line that I had going to my front brakes. So the front brake switch to actually send a signal to the rear brake and to the M-Unit, I extended that as well. So the other thing you're not gonna see in this is, in these videos, I went ahead and I used the grounding nut that's inside the housing of the M switches. I used that lug to ground it. I then thought that I wore down a little bit of the bars to bare metal where the set screw within that housing is. What I come to find out is that doesn't ground very well. So when I went to go test the bars after the fact, I realized this isn't gonna work. I'm not getting a clean signal back to the M-Unit. So what I ended up having to do was run all new grounds. So I ended up pulling everything back out, regrounding everything individually. I put all those grounds into the headlight bucket, and that's where I grounded it. Now everything works fantastic. But just another lesson learned to put in there. Run all these wires with their own grounds. Do not rely on grounding to the frame or to the bars. Didn't work out so hot. Alright, so loosened it up a little bit so I can move it around, and put a nice little hole there that's going to accommodate 3 power wires coming through from this little unit, the Mo button, and that will do our high beams turn signals. Alright, pulled all the wires through the bar. That was excruciating. And pulled the M button lines through. Alright, so in this portion of the video, I show how to connect together the wires coming through the bars into the switches. So already went ahead in the previous section here, you saw I hooked up the grounding lug, which was a wire that comes in the kit and actually has everything spliced together to a single loop terminal, and then you throw a screw into it that goes into the housing of the button. So what you see in this video is I actually used the little ferrules that come with the kit, stripped off the wiring, threaded the ferrule on, and used one of these. It's a ferrule crimper. So it's got these 4 little things on it that are shaped like triangles, and when you squeeze it, it brings all the triangles in together, crimps down that ferrule really nice and tight, and then you don't have to worry about the ferrule coming off. Gives you a really good base to then throw a set screw down on top of it, and it's not the wire fraying out. You got a nice solid point in order to mount to. So that gives you a really good connection. I did this on all my wires from where they were set in the switches and also back on the M-Unit. The only M-Unit wire that I didn't put a ferrule on was the one coming from my rectifier, and that's because the wire was a larger gauge and I didn't have any ferrules to put on it. So temporarily it's in the M-Unit right now without a ferrule, but I will be putting something on it here shortly once I get that done. All right, so take off the insulation, put the ferrules on that were in your kit, your fancy iWis ferrule crimper, and now you got a nice ferrule on the end of the wires, which then gets tucked down into the screws on the switches. All right, so here is the 3 button that's sorted out. So we put ferrules on the end of the wires. That goes to the M button that's inside the bar. It goes to one side of each of the buttons here, so you got a power going to each one, and then the other terminal goes to this grounding wire, which inside is going to go to this upper bolt with upper threaded hole with a screw, and then this little set screw here actually digs into the bar and gives you the grounding right through the housing. So that's the way we look like right now with one of the buttons. So the M button that's inside the bars right now that basically is wired up to all the switches, as well as the brake light switch that I ran another hole just big enough for the wire on the back side of the bar, and that's going to go to the switch right here. One side is going to be power, of course, and then the other side is a ground. So all the wires have finally been run through here. It was a hell of a job trying to get that through there. Had a buddy of mine help me. We were using a piece of steel wire to basically get through here and pull the things through that we needed. The M button runs off of this single green wire that comes out of it, and this is going to go back under the seat, and that's going to connect into the M-Unit and then pulled through this one little ground wire, which I'll probably ground up here on the triples or down here on the backbone, and that should firm up the front. So now I gotta start planning out and putting all this stuff into a wiring harness, including my LEDs that go up here on the dash, and figure out how I'm gonna run the rest of the wiring throughout the bike. Alright, so bars are all wired, switches are on, we tested some things, we got lights coming to the LEDs, the headlight is working properly, all my grounds and everything have been put into the headlight bucket. Shored everything up by running Revival's vinyl tubing with all of the electric, or all the inputs and outputs going through this bigger piece of vinyl along with the cloth wrap on top. Just put a little hole here, and this goes out to our points and the new electrical point system that's in the Honda and into our coils and ignition system. So this runs back, goes under the seat, back to the M-Unit, and then this smaller piece here, this I have on the other side of the backbone, and this is running my green wire that gives everything we need for the button communication to the M-Unit, as well as the sensors, the oil pressure, and the neutral sensor that are going to our LEDs. So that is pretty much all you need going back to this little booger under the seat. So this is kind of final wiring. On this side is all your inputs. Notice there's hardly anything. I just got a brake switch for my rear brake, and I have the green wire for the M-Unit, or the M button coming back to the M-Unit, gives it the proprietary signal over one wire. And then these are all your outputs going to everything on the bike to keep everything in check. So in these next couple of videos, you didn't see all the mess. Basically temporarily hooked up a lot of things just to test to make sure all the buttons were working properly and to ensure that the bike would actually start, because up to this point, didn't really even know if the starter motor was going to work. So it was nice to actually hear it crank a little bit and know that it was actually going to try to start the motor if the motor is still in good shape. What I did was, little tech tip, went out and I purchased a bunch of these little alligator clips, and they worked out really well because I could temporarily hook things up. So that way I knew, okay, I'm not good at just hooking everything up and then going back and testing everything. I need to know along the way. My personality just doesn't allow me to continue to keep working not knowing if something was working or not. It's how I found out that the bars were not grounded properly. So I had to go back through, like I said in previous segment, I went back in, regrounded everything in the headlight bucket, and that's how I knew. This next video, couple of videos, is when I actually found that now that I grounded properly, everything worked. So this is where I moved on to then going and looking at running all of my lines back from the headlight bucket and back to the M-Unit so I could clean everything up, put it all in vinyl loom as well as cloth over top of that to ensure that everything was protected. Son of a bitch if this shit don't work. It looks horrible. Alright, so I got everything roughed up using Revival's wonderful color-coded wires in the wiring kit. I got all the outputs wired up. The inputs, really all I'm using right now is the green here going to the kill, and that is the M button. I have this gray coming in, which is to the rear brake sensor. And then I have this temporarily hooked up, which is the ignition. Got a little junction box here that puts all the grounds to one single ground that I have going back to the battery. So temporarily what I have here is I really wanted to use the stock CB550 key and ignition, which is actually 4-wire. I guess, and I don't really know for certain, but I believe that the what are they called? TL1 and TL2 positions on the ignition are for having the lights just turn on, and the others, this one here, the red is for battery, and the black is for the actual ignition. So how I have it wired up is slightly opposite. I believe it would work either way because it's basically just at this point a switch. So I have the black going back to battery and the red going to the M-Unit. So if I can switch this on with one hand, you can see the M-Unit turns on and we're sitting there all nice and ready to go, at which point I can then hit my starter button, and I'm just going to tap it because I don't want it pumping too many times. I got low oil in here, and you can see the light up, so it's actually working. Now if I hold it slightly a second, it'll do a little stroke, and then you'll see the lights come on the output side. So now my LED is lit and I'm ready to go, and then when I hit my blinker bar buttons, I can test those on the M button. So high beam, low beam, flash. So seems like everything is mocked up and working well. So we shall see. Still waiting on Moto Gadget's taillights. I have my brake light ground running. I have the left and rights already pre-wired in. So I'm all ready to go. Moto Gadget, when you're ready to ship out some more parts, we will continue to move forward with, I'm waiting on my electronic ignition before I wire up the actual, this is the output or input that's going to go back to the M-Unit for ignition. This is currently coming off the points. I have to wire up the coils. So that's our next step. So I wanted to break down two places on the bike where I really needed a couple detailed wiring diagrams. First was the rectifier, the Regulator rectifier that I got from Revival Cycle. When I contacted their technical support and asked, okay, so how does this work with an M-Unit? They were very quick in sending me back a wiring diagram. That wiring diagram was set up to show me exactly what it would look like on my CB. So this is what they sent me. You can contact them as well. It shows you exactly where the green wires, the white wires go for your field coil, as well as the red going back to your starter solenoid and the black going to the M-Unit. So it was really good to get these wiring diagrams. I mean, look at that. I mean, I'm not that smart of a guy, and that is really easy to follow. So something to look forward to if you're doing this and you're purchasing some stuff from Revival Cycle. They're going to be really good at getting back to you on this stuff. The other thing I had a problem with was putting in my other videos. You'll see me install a new electronic ignition system on the 550, and I wasn't quite sure how the M-Unit factored into that, the coils and all this other stuff. And when you know it, you email them and they send you another very simplistic wiring diagram for the dyna being in there, as well as the RICS regulator and rectifier. So Revival helped me all through this. I mean, I got to meet the guys one time when I was in Austin, and they were nice enough to invite me to the shop. And I gotta tell you, their support staff, their sales guys, they're all really good, and they provide some great support when you're doing things like this. This is the first Honda I've ever built. First time I'm using an M-Unit, and these guys have been amazing at doing this. So this wiring diagram works off of their bundle system, where they send you the wires that are already labeled, they're color coded, everything. This wiring diagram, you can see on there, all the lines are color coded. So, I mean, how easy is that, right? So, that's there. They also sent me this one. This is a little bit more complicated, but gives you such great details on the side of what everything goes to, how everything works, if you really want to load the bike up with all the features. And then this is the wiring diagram specific for the starter solenoid. of which I didn't really show a video of that. I'll show a clip of me after it's finally been done and everything's been wired up. But good things to have, handy to have. Their website has all these wiring diagrams out there. If you go and look up their starter solenoid, it'll show you how to install it with these schematics. So, good thing to keep in mind, lesson learned. Make sure you got all of your stuff laid out for ahead of time. Do your homework, know what you're dealing with, and plan it out. Made a little custom mount here for the main starter solenoid. So this has main fuses already in it. Put a nice little plug attached to it. These whole starter solenoid with the main fuse comes from Revival Cycle. It's a really nice little unit. On one post up here, you're putting power to the starter. This is main power coming from your battery, which goes into a fuse. And then this is mostly ground, power, and signal going back to the M.Unit. This is coming over from the rectifier and regulator, which is on the other side of the bike. I wanted to make it so that this was accessible. The fuses were accessible by pulling the panel off and having real easy access to it. And then on the other side, I have the same thing, made a couple brackets to mount the rectifier, so that way it's real easy just to pull the panel and get to that. So this is Rick's regulator rectifier that I got to replace the stock one that was on the bike. Wired it up the way the wiring diagram said so. Created this custom mount so that when the cover is put over top, it's real easy to get to, but you don't see it. Put away. Gets plenty of airflow to keep it cool. I put a quick disconnect on here for everything that's going back to the stator, so that way, you know, when it's recharging, it can come back through here. So that's what that looks like. And then, so the green is going to ground, and this black is going back to the M.Unit, whereas all these yellows, white, and green, separate green, are going back to the stator. So, quick sum up. Headlight bucket contains a lot of the wiring, grounding, everything for the bars, buttons, LEDs, switch for brake, running all the vinyl tubing back into the M.Unit. Very large battery power going down to the starter solenoid, which is on this side. Power coming in here, starter motor going out, and these are the connections into the M.Unit as well as back to the regulator rectifier. On the other side, we got the Rick's regulator rectifier going back to the stator as well as going back to the M.Unit. M.Unit minimum inputs due to the M button in the bars. Typically this would all be filled and populated with all the individual input wires going back to the bars, but since we use the M button, it's just a single green wire. This wire here, which has blue shrink wrap on it, but is actually a brown, this goes back to the coils and to the ignition system. This gray is an input that is coming in for the brake, rear brake, as well as, well, no, it's just the rear brake. So that's what's signaling for the brake lights. This is coming, this wire here, this bundle is a ground, as well as my ignitions coming in from the, or actually it's the starts. I guess that's the starting, I don't know, not exactly sure what you call that. But these are coming in for from the starter solenoid. So it takes 2 spots, I believe, because of the amperage that's needed in order to do that starting. The main line coming in from the front bars that comes down here. These outputs, this is what basically all that comes in for the going up to the headlight bucket, and that is the mass majority of these outputs here. So I got taillight, turn signals, headlights. This big black one is going to the regulator, and all that good stuff. Grounding, I made sure to go back and reground everything using this really nice Wago, I think they're called Wago blocks. It basically one ground in, and then you start plugging your other grounds into it, and it makes it very easy to ground everything out. And that's about it. I reused my ignition here using just the black and red, got rid of the browns, which were the intermediary. And you will see here, if I go ahead and turn that, you'll see the activation of the M-Unit. You'll see the light behind here is on, ready to go. And then I have the other light down here saying that it's ready to start. If I hit my starter button, you'll see all the other lights come on, just like I did in the previous tests. So we're good to go. Turn the key off, and everything is done. All right. So lessons learned. What did I figure out in this first expedition into the M.Unit and Moto Gadget? Well, I learned a couple things. One, make sure you ground properly. You know, dealing with old Triumphs and stuff like that, it really, you know, using magnetos and having very minimal wiring, I wasn't used to the grounding problem. Usually you just ground to the frame and you're good to go. Making sure to scrape off any paint and having really good contact. This one definitely became mandatory that all of your grounding be done properly. So lesson learned there. Drilling the bar holes, making sure that you give yourself plenty of room, making sure you're using grommets, making sure you're using shrink wrap in order to ensure that those wires are very small. Any little bit of rubbing, making sure that you're deburring the holes, making sure that nothing is getting tore up off the metal. I learned that pretty good just by having to remove the M button and putting it back in multiple times, because I was having such an issue until I made sure that the holes were bigger, making sure I gave myself a little extra wire, you know, giving myself some room to play. Trying to make everything fit with what came stock was a little difficult, so giving myself a little bit of extra room made it a little bit easier. Making sure you got the right tools. I went and, you know, I talk a lot about Revival, but I really look up to those guys. They do everything the right way. So, you know, went out and I purchased a lot of these wiring tools. This is a IWIS B open barrel crimper. Gives you all the right crimping for the open barrels and stuff like that you're using when you're doing this. Getting yourself a ferrule crimper, making sure that you're giving yourself the right ends on your wires to make sure that you got good connectivity. And then going back into the grounding, I learned about these little things. So these here are little compact splicers, right? So this comes, they send you a couple of these Wago splicers with the bundle that you get if you go through Revival. And they have these little like thing, you flip them up, you put your wire in the back, and you push it down, and it holds on to your grounding wire. So now you can have one active ground going in, and you have 4 more to basically consolidate all your grounds to one little simple block. It's a grounding block, and it's better than having, I'm used to having a, you know, big hunking box that you plug in one wire going out to ground, and then you got to actually screw down each individual one. This made it a lot easier because this little box I could put in the wiring into the headlight bucket, and this actually grounded everything properly. So That's another lesson learned. The other lesson, wiring diagrams. As much as I planned and made sure I had all the right materials and made sure I had all the right tools and made sure I had all the little quick disconnects and things like that, the wiring diagrams really, to sit back down after you got a section of the bike done, sit back down, review the wiring diagrams. Did I do everything right? Does everything test out properly? No? Okay, I'm going back to my wiring diagram. Let's look at this again. Okay, oh, there's where I screwed up. Allowed for troubleshooting. I gave you a lot better idea of what you missed, how you should wire it, as opposed to what you did. And really having these wiring diagrams, you know, starting out with something at a really high level and then breaking it down to a component, right? So having the two of these really helped tremendously. So I would say that those are my biggest lessons learned in this whole project. I'm sure a lot of you out there have even more lessons learned, and I'd love to hear about them in the comments, or go ahead if you have any questions with this. I understand I didn't videotape everything in the process. I have a tendency to hurry along once I see the end of the finish line and I want to get it done, and I didn't quite video everything. So if you have any questions, put them in the comments. Go ahead and send me a message. Let me know what type of questions you had. And then hopefully, you know, we can answer them, have a good discussion in the comments. And if you send me a direct link or a direct message, I will go ahead and message you back with an answer, what I did. It might be right, might be wrong, but it's what I did, and everything seems to work. Bike fired up great. Did some balancing of the carburetors, and it sounds good. Sent everything out for upholstery and paint. So I will be doing a final wrap up of all the products used on the CB550 winter project, coming out soon, probably in the next month, once I get the paint and upholstery back from all the guys I use that are out of state. So I sent all my stuff off to Flamethrower Customs out in Ohio for paint work. I got S&S Upholstery to be doing my seat for me. So hopefully we'll see that stuff back here so shortly, and can do a full wrap up of the bike and then a test, and then do reviews of everything that we use. So I will see everybody later. Thanks a lot.